All right, everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Andy Nguyen, and today we're going to talk about the GMMK Pro. Finally, the GMK Pro. Let's get into it. They said from the jump, it's going to be an ultra premium board for beginners, enthusiasts, professionals, and gamers. So the specs were pretty good. It had the LEDs, it had the 5-pin hot swap, it had the gasket mounts, it had the different plate options like the polycarbonate, the aluminum, and the brass. It had some foam in there, which hit or miss for some people, but it's supposed to make the board sound better, in my opinion. And all of this was going to be in a package under $200. Only $170, and you don't have to wait for a group buy. To get this started though, I, like many people, have been very frustrated with the group buy model. You go buy the idea of a board, you've never seen it, you've never touched it. There's very minimal reviews on it. Sometimes there's prototypes, but the prototype can vary from the production unit. You put that money down, whether it be a few $100s like $200, $300, or it could even go up to $600, $700. And if you buy extras like an upgraded weight or extra plates, extra PCBs, it can reach up to $1,000. Where does that money go? Well, it goes into a group buy phase where you end up waiting 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes 9. And if some other delays happen, up to a year or more. That model, as a regular consumer outside of keyboards, it sucks a little bit, dude. Like, you don't really get customer service after the fact, so you can't return it if you don't like it. And what if during that period you change your mind? That is a totally valid response to having waited such a long time for a keyboard. And in any other industry, that kind of model done consistently is kind of ridiculous. I know Kickstarters are done like this, where backers will front the product or front the idea of the product because they believe in the maker. And after a certain period of time, the idea is that company will stop doing that model and kind of move to a more traditional model where they front the cost of production. In keyboards, there are some in-stock options like the Owl Lab options, the Keycaps Brutus line, and the Mode 80. Unfortunately, there's not much beyond that. Like Mode Designs, Glorious sought to shake up this business model by offering a premium product at an affordable price in stock without the group buy waits. That's very commendable. That is something we needed desperately. When my friends and family and other acquaintances ask about recommendations for a beginner board, it's hard for me to recommend anything because I have to tell them that they have to put money down and they have to wait. And for anyone else, that's just not gonna happen. So with that out of the way, before I get into the review, I know that there are 5,000, 6,000 customers that have already bought the GMMK Pro, maybe already have it in hand, and they're not gonna like this review. And I think that's based off of a phenomenon that my friend described to me, where people end up watching reviews for things they've already bought to kind of reaffirm their purchase. Maybe they're still waiting for it, they're still excited about it. They want to feel like they made a good buy. And unfortunately, there's always two sides of every coin. There's good reviews and kind of more critical reviews. The review today may not make you happy, so you may want to click off now. To be honest, there is a place for this board in this market. To be honest, this board can be the board for you. There is a specific customer that wants a GMMK Pro that tends to be ignored in the world of custom mechanical keyboards. This customer does not want a Jane. They just want a nice looking keyboard that has some nice features, that looks cool, that has that knob, and is worthy of showing off and looks good on a desk. Do they need the best sound and feel? Some may, or some may realize that they don't care. Maybe they just wear headphones all the time. They're a gamer and they just want something that looks cool. The purpose of me making this very video right here is not to bash Glorious, not to bash a product, but to actually study how specs do not always translate to the final product. Especially in the world of custom mechanical keyboards, we're often forced to buy things off of specs. And right now, if we look at the new interest checks and the new group buys, interest check being this kind of feeler that designers put out ahead of time where they're still kind of figuring out the design of the board, taking some community feedback before actually running with the production. And the group buy is the pre-order phase for a keyboard, and they're all using the same buzzwords. They're all gasket mount, top right blocker, and they have the same features on paper. How do we figure out what is going to translate to a good sounding board? There are a lot of nuances in board design that isn't really shown on the interest check or the group buy phase. I'm going to read this part so I don't mess it up. Per Glorious, the GMK Pro is an ultra premium gasket mounted 75% layout, fully modular, hot swappable keyboard built for enthusiasts, gamers, and professionals. The thing that I want to focus on here is the ultra premium aspect. When the announcement was made, Glorious had made some keyboards before. It was a 60% and a TKL, but they hadn't made an ultra premium board yet. With the price that they were offering, $170, and all the features they were packing into it, I wasn't sure that everything was going to translate well. I will state the things I do like about this board. It can be improved, and I do think that the V2, if they so choose to make one, will be pretty damn good. Number one, the board is easy to buy. You can go to the website during the buy phase and you don't have to worry about refreshing. You don't have to worry about the website crashing. You don't have to worry about very, very limited stock. Number two, the pre-order period is short. It was about 2 months or so, not so bad, versus 6, 9, 12 months that I've experienced with other group buys. And number three, it looks cool on the desk. With the knob and the RGB and the kind of like clean, minimal design. Number four, it offers a lot of features that are not found in under $200 boards. Typically under $200, you don't find an aluminum board. You don't have a mounting other than a simple sandwich mount or a tray mount. This one being gasket mounted per the spec, it's pretty good. Number five, it has hot swap. A lot of people ask me, what is the best board I can get for hot swap? Unfortunately, most customs don't have hot swap sockets installed from the factory. If someone wants hot swap, they have to buy the board, they have to buy Milmax sockets, solder them on themselves, or hire someone to do it. And that all adds time, cost, and is a little bit more of a hassle. Number six, it's a really good price, $170. It's really hard to beat that price point for something that has a knob, 75% layout, and is aluminum. Number seven is the most important thing. This is sold by Glorious. You may have your doubts about Glorious, you may not like what their company represents, but they are a real company. They will take care of you in terms of customer service. If there's any issues, you can return the board, you can get a warranty exchange, and you can kind of treat them more like a store rather than someone designing a keyboard in their free time. And this board has no real competitor for the $170 to $200 price point because of its layout. Glorious is very smart in choosing a hole in the market where there wasn't a lot of competition and there wasn't a lot of supply. People that wanted F keys and a knob didn't have any other options. They looked to the Satisfaction 75 or they looked at other kind of premium 75% keyboards like the 7V, and these higher end boards don't have hot swap option built in. I see this time and time again in the Discord servers for these new boards. There's a lot of people asking, is there a hot swap option? More often than not, there isn't. Even if it missed the mark, it's still the best option for that price point. They're very smart in choosing this little segment of the market to supply a product in. So yes, the board strengths are its spec sheet, but let's get into the spec sheet now. Let's talk about the gasket mount implementation. A gasket mount is when you have some kind of material between the plates and the top case and the bottom case. So this is a plate, top gasket, bottom gasket, right? In this board, there is a gasket on top and a gasket on bottom. But when I actually built the board on stream, I noticed that the way that the plate was mounted to the PCB, which is important because of hot swap, you need to have some kind of rigidity in there, some kind of structure. But the plate was mounted using these metal tabs in the aluminum plate and the brass plate, these metal tabs at multiple points on the top and the bottom of the plate. That's thicker than a screw. So when we talk about how boards have too many screws or too many mounting points, creating a stiffer typing experience, with the standoffs up top, with the standoffs on the bottom, and the acrylic sides that have to be screwed in as well. So now you have mounting points all along the plate and the PCB. That's very akin to a sandwich mount. So the plate is here, the top case is here, the bottom case is here. It just gets sandwiched in and it's pretty stiff, which isn't a bad thing, but it isn't gasket. So in this board, although it does have gasket pads on the top and bottom, do you think this will in any way allow it to flex when you have all this plus two mounting points here? This is like a sandwich mount inside a gasket mount. It's kind of treated as one unit, almost like a brick. It's very stiff. And unfortunately, that combined with the fact that the board design has very little void space, and all that void space is being stuffed with case foam and PCB foam. PCB foam meaning the foam between the plate and the PCB. Everything is just compressed into this tight little brick, right? So in terms of the flexibility that is afforded with a gasket mount, that just simply is not there. When looking at the gasket pads from the factory, you can see that they're already pretty compressed as the board was assembled. You can see that the gasket pads have no more give because it's all so tight in there. So when I did the build, I tried to maximize the flexibility to give the board its best shot. Because when I heard the sound test, the gasket mounting or the whole plate PCB assembly muted switches so much, it made everything sound flat. So I figured if I can add some flexibility back by maybe doing some simple modifications, perhaps I can make the board sound better. To try to remedy this, I didn't use the two standoffs in the center of the plate and PCB, and instead of having 4 up top and 4 on bottom, I took out the 2 centers of either side. I still had to keep the screws for the acrylic diffusers on the side because I felt like without the screws, it would just fall out. And there was an option to use extra gaskets. I decided not to use those. It already felt compressed enough. I felt like adding more gaskets would only make the problem worse. And I took out the PCB foam and I did not use the case foam. I did all this to try to yield the best sound, and I'm gonna leave a sound test right here, right now, to let you hear how this board sounds with OP Blacks, which are a very poppy switch. Give it a listen. So to explain what's going on here, technically it is a gasket mount, but the keyboard design itself, having no void space, being compressed so much, yields a pretty flat sound. It sounds like a keyboard. As someone who loves sound and does not use headphones typically, it makes me sad to put nice switches in here and not be able to hear them. The benefit of hot swap is you can test switches, right? So without being able to hear the differences and nuances of switches and having them sound very similar, that's just unfortunate. And I have a sound clip here where I tried different switches in the board side by side, and I think you can hear that they don't sound very different. There's still a difference because they are different switches, but the sound difference is not that dramatic. OP Black, SP Star, and Ink. OP Black, SP Star, Ink. OP Black, SP Star, Ink. Moyu Black and Jelly. Moyu Black in GMK Pro. Jelly. GMK Pro. SP Star in the GMK Pro. SP Star in the Vega. GMMK Pro. Vega. And listen to the OP Black next to SP Star. They're not supposed to sound the same. The next feature of this board is the RGB. The perky RGB, like Glorious is known for, is great. It shines, there's all these features, it's all presets. In the Glorious software, you can change it pretty easily, but the side-firing LEDs are very lackluster. I'll compare it to another board, which is the Space 65 Cyber Voyager, which has a very bright side-firing LED, and you can see the difference side by side in the same environment. That if you look at the image that they use to advertise the board, where the light is shining really bright, and that's the expectation, right? You can see the actual reality on my desk, where I put it down and maximize RGB, and it's just non-existent. This is actually lit, dude. It may be the material for the diffuser, or maybe the fact that the LEDs used aren't bright enough, or the placement of the LEDs. That feature is not really a strong point of this board. It looks cool if you look at it from the side, but in terms of sitting there and using the board, it won't really be there. $170 aluminum keyboard, right? So this is where the board surprised me. I figured they had to have cut costs somewhere. Probably sounds hollow or something like that. But the reality is, it doesn't. The build I did on stream, I did not use any case foam, I did not use the PCB foam, and I couldn't really hear any hollowness. Of course, if you look for it and you listen for it, then perhaps you can, but the board itself is pretty solid. So there's a thumbs up for me in terms of the aluminum case for the GMK Pro. All right, let's talk about the knob. The knob is a hot feature that a lot of people want, but it isn't really offered in many boards, not any affordable boards anyway. So having them offer one here is really nice. But the problem is the knob they used, I don't know why knobs are only $1 or $2. Yo, this one's a nice one. Wait, what the f? What kind of... What the sh? Holy... They used a knob with silicone inside. I guess for ease of use, they didn't want the customer to have to use the screwdriver. It's a toolless install and removal, but because it's kind of molded roughly, the knob wobbles. You get your ultra premium board, right? We haven't talked about it in a minute, ultra premium. And the knob just wobbles. It just feels cheap. All right, we gotta talk about the GOAT stabilizers, GOAT, standing for greatest of all time. I believe they shot themselves in the foot by naming their product this way. If they didn't name it this way, they just called it Glorious Stabilizers, no one would really bat an eyelash. So it is leaf from the factory. Indeed, there's grease on the wires, but it doesn't sound that great. It still rattles. I went ahead and added more grease, the dielectric, and it still sounded kind of below average. If you were to do the Band-Aid mod, I found that doing a Band-Aid mod beneath the stabilizer and above the PCB, that kind of makes stabilizers sound better, or maybe just hides the deficiencies of the stabilizer. I don't like doing the Band-Aid mod on stabilizers because it makes it feel mushy, especially if you add lube on top of the Band-Aid. It's just kind of gross, but if you have a kind of bad sounding stabilizer, it is a move to make it sound better. So I do not recommend using the GOAT stabilizers. If you're gonna get some stabilizers, try to use another one. So get some Durock V1, Durock V2, C3, any other. The problem is, because the plates, the brass plate and the aluminum plate, are punched rather than CNC'd, there's inconsistencies in what stabilizers can fit into the plate. Some people have reported that Durock stabilizers don't fit into their brass or aluminum plates, which is very unfortunate because that was one of the biggest deficiencies of the board. So just swapping the stabilizers can make make it pretty usable, but because of the design choice, I'm not gonna say it's a cost-saving choice, but being punched rather than CNC'd, being inconsistent. I'm gonna show you real quick. You see that? It's not flat. It's sloped away from the plate. Your mileage may vary as to what stabilizers you can use. So build quality, this is where everything fell apart for me. So during the build stream, I looked at everything with a critical eye. The anodization was clean. The assembly was good. There's no gaps, no inner machining marks, no scuffs, no dents, no scratches, anything like that. But when I put the board back together, I realized that 2 screws had snapped off inside the case. I thought I used the wrong screw. It snapped! Tell me again how this board is just fine. That we shouldn't complain because it's $170. I was the first person assembling it. I was using a high quality driver. I was using a WeHa driver, unscrewing it. I've built a few boards in my day. Maybe these big muscles destroyed the screws, but I don't know. 2 screw snaps. Maybe they use cheaper screws. That is something that is not unique to any company. Some group buy runners also use cheap components, and it snapped in there. And unfortunately, couldn't get it out. Luckily, I could still close the case, but only taking it apart one time caused the components to break. Really doesn't lend itself to something that's meant for a beginner to try to test different things in their board. So they started with the marketing for ultra premium, but somewhere along the line, it got massaged to be a board meant for beginners trying to dip their toes into the custom mechanical keyboard hobby. So this board is intended for someone to take apart, modify, swap plates, swap stabilizers, swap switches. But there's 2 things that are weird about that. There are a ton of screws, which makes it really difficult to keep track of and to take apart and put it back together. I honestly had to go back to my own VOD to figure out how to put the board back together. After taking it apart one time, the screw snapped. But we gotta roll back to the number 7 feature of this board, which is customer service. The clients contacted Glorious regarding the snap screws, and they took care of them right away. That is really good, and that's something I don't really expect out of vendors for the typical group buy model. They often say, can you buy some new screws? Can you buy a tool? Can you try to take it out yourself? This was probably just a fluke. It was probably just a bad unit. Not really a knock against them, but it's a very good pro for them taking care of the customer. There are other criticisms that I have, but they're very nitpicky. Don't really need to be mentioned in this already extremely long video where I go into detail about specifications. And for fun, I did build the ID80. I waited to make this review after I looked at the ID80 because the ID80 is really the only competitor to the board in this price point. This right here is the ID80. This is the ID80 Plus that runs $159. I'll put the price on the screen. It isn't too expensive. It's a little bit cheaper than the GMK Pro, but this unit specifically has an acrylic bottom rather than full aluminum. So you expect it to be a little bit cheaper. Here's the GMK Pro. And a quick little comparison between the two. After the build, I tested the sound between the two. And I personally think that the ID80 sounds more hollow. This is the ID80 Plus, which is the unit that sounds the least hollow. Unfortunately, it does sound a little hollow, but I believe that this hot swap board allows more of the switch sound to come through. You can hear a hint of hollow, but at least the sound kind of is opened up more. The switch sound is not kind of muffled by the board. Whereas with the GMK Pro, it is a little bit muffled. And if you find that the hollow sound makes it feel cheaper, then it is what it is. It is definitely true that cheaper boards tend to sound hollow. So yeah, the GMK Pro feels a little bit more premium, but in terms of an enthusiast perspective, I think the ID80 wins in terms of kind of experiencing more of the hobby. The GMMK Pro is more like a one and done, grab it and go focus on more productive hobbies, honestly. So let's talk about my final thoughts. I honestly believe this board was a very good attempt. It brought a product to the market that a lot of people wanted, and at the price point that was affordable for people to get into the hobby. That is amazing, that is great. My main concern was that they marketed it as something that it ended up not being. It wasn't the board that was going to really shake up the industry as we thought it would. It was still just more so an entry-level keyboard, or a kind of a little bit above entry level where someone can kind of modify and test and start their journey in the hobby. There are a few shortcomings, of course, but no one hits a home run on their first try. That's totally understandable. My 2 main concerns were the mounting system not really being gasket, so that was like a big selling point. So it's unfortunate that they had all those metal tabs. I recommend that people might try to just kind of slice those tabs off on the plate. It may be more feasible on the polycarbonate, and if it gets screwed up, buy another polycarbonate plate or just use the aluminum. I think this board sounds pretty decent with tactiles because tactiles are inherently louder, so being flattened out by the sound is okay. In terms of linears, it just all kind of sounds the same, which is very unfortunate. And the screw snapping, That makes me concerned for a lot of people's boards. I would advise people to be very careful taking apart their boards, putting it back together. But they have the customer service available, which is a great thing. If any issues arise, definitely contact them. I'm sure they'll take care of you. It's really the advertising. If they didn't advertise it so heavily as this ultra premium board that was going to kind of nullify the need to enter any group buys, then they would have been fine. If they marketed it very similarly to the NK65EE or the IKI68 Aurora or the Portico or the Ramakara or the KB67 Lite, it would kill. Unfortunately, we are nudged to comparing it with more premium boards because they advertise it as an ultra premium keyboard. And in that regard, it definitely misses the mark. But there's definitely room for improvement. If they fix these few things, such as the plate PCB design and the stabilizers, they probably could just rename them and maybe using nicer components, more high quality components for the screws. It can be a definite winner and a great option for beginners coming into the hobby. I honestly still recommend this board depending on who talks to me. So the customer that just wants something that looks nice, that values aesthetic and layout over sound, can really enjoy this board. That's just the customer, and there's just a lot of different customers that exist in the world. And if we're gonna be frank, that customer I just described is more common than people like me that are very nerdy and very into the nuts and bolts of custom mechanical keyboards. So they definitely have the opportunity to do something amazing in the hobby, which is bringing high quality, high quantity, accessible keyboards to people who want it. So I think that's gonna have a positive effect on the hobby, to have more accessible options for more people rather than these very niche options for very few people that take a long time. That was a long one. Hopefully I didn't lose you along the way. That was a very detailed video breaking down the specifications. And I know a lot of people critique me for not having the board in hand and having concerns about it and having complaints about it and critiquing and reviewing it. Well, I do have it in hand now, right? And nothing has really changed. My opinion is the same. It's just now I have more data backing it. And hopefully that was valuable to you to break down all the specifications, the expectations versus reality. And hopefully it doesn't discourage you if you did buy the board. It's still usable. There's some modifications that you may have to do, or you can just ignore them, wear your headphones and enjoy your keyboard and not listen to me because I'm toxic or an elitist or whatever you think I am. And that's it for the video. Thank you for watching the video. Please like if you like this kind of content. Please subscribe if you want to see more. Please consider joining the channel memberships that I just launched on the channel if you want to support me as a creator. Please give me a thumbs up if you watched all the way through. Please subscribe if you want to see more. And I opened the channel memberships. Please consider supporting if you are able. It helps me, helps the channel, helps me do more regarding keyboards, regarding tech, regarding everything. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.